Alison's final days were difficult for everybody involved. I think we all saw it as a team come in, which was difficult, and we tried to have a few team meetings around it just to kind of re-go through what the plan was and what we were looking at. Alison had repeated chest infections, so there's a line that comes where it's do you continue to eat, or because that's what's causing the chest infections. So we all were prepped for the inevitable happening. We were lucky that the Dementia project came in on board as well, because we'd kind of said, actually, help, this seems to be going really quick now, and it did. As with many people's last days, I think the last bit just spirals really quickly, and one evening I got a phone call at home to say that she really didn't seem right, she was very chesty, she'd been sick, and they'd phoned the paramedics. And something tells you, I think it always does, that that actually, I wouldn't usually come in every time Alison went to hospital, but something wasn't sat right, so I came in to see them. The paramedics were there, they agreed, it sounded like she had a really crackly chest, so wanted to take her in, which was absolutely fine. I was happy for her to get seen. However, she had about 6 chest infections over the last 6 months, so we kind of knew the routine, and part of me was going, actually, why are we continuing to torture in some ways this lady with antibiotics to fix it, only for her to be in the same position in 2 weeks' time? So that I went into hospital with that view, going, actually, enough's enough. So the paramedics were amazing, really complimentary of the support that they saw Alison get while we were getting her ready to go to hospital, as there was no massive rush, so we just kind of got on with things as we needed to. And yeah, it was lovely to kind of hear their feedback when we got to the hospital and say it's one of the best places they'd visited, to see that Alison got great support. And then A&E is never a good time for anybody, in my experience. That it's a busy place, it's noisy, the hustle and bustle is all a bit crazy. So that wasn't the most pleasant of experiences. You just have to get through it. And the nurses were fab, to be fair. The doctors seemed to be listening to us when we were saying, actually, can we please give this lady a little bit of dignity and just maybe let nature take its course? And they were, then eventually she got moved around to a ward where she had an amazing doctor who said, she's very, very sick, there's very little that we can do, what's the plan? Do you want to get her home, sort of thing? And that was instantly my reaction. Of course I want to get her home. And that's when I became in my, I kind of wrapped myself in a bubble of me and Alison then. I was going to do everything. If I needed to move in, I would move in to see these final days through, because I was conscious that my staff team had very much let me know that some didn't want to be a part of that. It was too traumatic for them, and I completely respected their decisions, but I wanted to do what was best for what I saw as best for Alison, and actually that in hindsight wasn't really the best decision, but that's what I was doing. I was trying to make it as best as possible for Alison. And at one point I'd been at the hospital for 21 hours and I thought, can I really do this? Well, I'm going to have to, because there were plenty that wanted to support, but I didn't want to put that burden on anyone else, being the one that had to be there when she did die. However, she had so many visitors, because we did what you do, you ring around, you tell people that actually we've decided to just let this happen. Nurses and consultants had said it's unlikely that she'll survive the night, so we prepped for that, lots of visits, lots of tears. We got those up that Alison lived with so that they could, come and see her, because they worried massively every time she went in hospital anyway. So it was always good to get them to come along, and always really emotional for everyone to watch Rachel, who was Alison's best friend, and is in other films around her relationship with Alison, because you could see that natural bond between them still, even though Alison was unconscious. The love that Rachel had was so deep. So it was that was a difficult night, but Alison got through it, and actually the next day she looked better than she had done for a couple of weeks. So I'm not entirely sure what that was, but a last wind maybe. And then the next few days were difficult that came just before the passing, but it was the hospital in the end that said actually she can't be taken home because she's too sick to transport. She kept having seizures, and they were quite big seizures, and there was a risk that something like that could have happened whilst transporting her back home. So it was around just making her comfortable. Lots of her belongings were brought in from home to make her bed, seem a bit more like it was homely. And it was kind of the staff team saying to me, and the area manager saying to me, that actually, Alison had no idea where she was for her final days, but we made it as homely as possible. But the people that we support that lived with Alison certainly would have known if Alison had been there when she died, and that would have had a huge impact on them. And it took me a while to wrap my head around that, because I just wanted Alison home. But actually, I think what we did in keeping her in the hospital and bringing home to her was a much better decision, because people got to, like I say, come and say their goodbyes, but it didn't have to be in their face, for the not so nice bits as well, for Rachel and Kerin, who came to see her most days while she was there. There's a lovely moment, and again I think someone's commented about it in one of the films, is around Rachel singing I think an ABBA song to Alison, and there's several people in the room with Alison and Rachel, and there's not a dry eye in the house, because Rachel's completely zoned out of who is there. She's just her and Alison, which was so lovely. And then eventually the weekend came, and kind of what happened. Alison passed away, as well as could be, pain-free. Seemed to be as good a death as someone could have, which obviously led into speaking to the team and taking that back. So, as with most people's deaths, the closest people to them, I don't think necessarily grieve straight away, because they go into that mode of, this needs sorting, that needs sorting, I need to get everything done, who do I need to tell? And actually the process was fairly simple. We split it between the people that were involved. The family were very much took the lead on sorting the funeral, which was great. We informed the necessary authorities that we needed to do so, the council, CQC, and actually it was a fairly straightforward process, which I'm sure in the past could have been traumatic for people, but we were prepped and prepared ourselves for these things that we were going to do a while ago. So that forward planning meant that we'd already got it in our minds on what we needed to do, and didn't come as too much of a shock. The team were absolutely fab. Everyone was obviously upset, but in supporting each other, respecting just that people would deal with it in different ways, and just having complete respect for each other's decisions on how they would grieve, whether they wanted to go to funerals and things, was again really, really good. Telling Rachel was never going to be easy, and telling Kerin. Kerin had gone home actually, so Kerin's mum broke the news, but Rachel was more Rachel was the one who was home alone for the weekend when it actually happened. She was obviously distraught, as you can imagine. She, however, did, look back at the positive things and the happy memories and the things that we were encouraging her to share. And as is with Rachel, she took complete advantage of whatever she could over those next couple of days, meals out and things, just to kind of get that one-on-one time with staff so that she could let people know how she was. And she really wanted to be, she has that really caring side, Rachel, in that respect. She was really bothered about people that knew, so she was constantly asking, do they know? And she would say she was really keen on telling Alison's key worker. She wanted to be the person to tell Alison's key worker. So the member of staff on shift that day actually took her to the key worker's house to break the news, which was, it was fully involving Rachel, and she felt this real responsibility and kind of ownership of that, which was, completely fab for us to just let her take the lead with. So that was all fairly good. And actually, I suppose the thing that always shocks me when somebody has passed away is those that Rachel and Karen and the people that she lived with seemed to deal with it so fluidly and just got on with the matter. But actually, reflection and tells me that they lost Alison, their friend, a long time ago. So actually what was coming wasn't as much of a shock as what we saw when they did lose Alison, their friend, because that had more of an impact than Alison's actual death. However, we did see some real reactions from people that I wouldn't have expected it from. Alison was in a relationship for a few years before she had dementia with a gentleman called Martin. And when Alison was diagnosed, he pretty much shut Alison off, and that just seemed to be his coping mechanism, because she's not Alison who I know anymore, and just shut it down. But then there's a beautiful, a member of staff managed to get some filming of it, image where he came into the office and had asked for a picture of Alison. So he'd chosen his favourite one, taken it, put it in his room, and then his sister had supported him out for the day, and they'd bought a frame for it and some flowers. And then that evening, a member of staff goes into the flat, and Martin has a keyboard. And they went in because there was some music coming out from the flat, and Martin was playing a song with the photo frame and, the flowers on the sideboard, and it was just so beautiful to see. It was such a natural reaction, and he wasn't doing it for anyone's attention, he wasn't doing it for any other reason other than just it was his way of, I suppose, dealing with it and saying goodbye. And there was no one else there, it was just him playing along the piano, and it was just so beautiful. It'll stick with me forever. And those reactions are the ones I think that caught me off guard a bit, because he didn't care about Alison for the last 2 years, so why is it all of a sudden a big deal? But he did. I think he just shut it away, and actually her death seemed to hit him harder than it did Rachel or Karen, because finally something had happened. It wasn't just that she was away anymore, and Rachel and Karen could see that constantly. Martin had just completely shut the door on it, so he really felt it more so than, like I say, anyone. And he had a family member die quite recently, and I'd not seen that reaction from that either, which also led me to question whether he was also grieving that process as well. I think on reflection, what I learned was to expect the unexpected. It will never run according to plan. There are elements of it, and I think it's great to have that overarching, this is what I want, this is how I expect my dignified death to be, but there are always going to be add-ins and slight changes, because things never run that way, as the world tells us. So, you know, I think we got things right, but like I say, expect the unexpected.